The first thing Rowan Calder noticed about Northbridge University was the way the wind seemed to slap him awake even before he reached the quad. Frost lingered in the corners of the walkways, and the smell of burnt coffee and wet leaves carried through the air. He tugged his scarf tighter, feeling the familiar weight of annoyance settle into his chest. He had survived 12 years of being the older sibling to Ivy Calder, chaotic, brilliant, maddening Ivy, and he had expected college to be a sanctuary. A place where he could blend in, be someone else entirely. And yet here she was. Rowan had known the moment he spotted her in the registration line that she'd somehow wormed her way into the same university. Ivy Calder, the girl who had turned every class, every family dinner, and every minor school assignment into a battleground, was here. Smiling brightly at a nervous freshman 2 feet away, hair glinting like she'd just stepped out of a magazine, oblivious to the world or, more importantly, him. He felt his chest tighten. Not anger. Not entirely. Something else. Betrayal, tinged with awe. She had planned this carefully, no doubt, selecting the same campus, applying under her mother's surname, disguising the fact that they were siblings. 12 years of enduring her antics, 12 years of being teased, shoved, mocked, and she had done it again. And somehow, she looked entirely triumphant. Rowan wanted to turn on his heel and walk away. He wanted to pretend he didn't notice her. He wanted to breathe through the next 4 years without her meddling, without the constant chaos that followed her like a storm cloud. And yet, he couldn't. Because Ivy had always been a master of magnetism. He watched as she flitted through the line, small gestures of perfect politeness hiding a storm underneath. Her eyes caught his briefly, and he thought he saw a flicker of amusement. His stomach knotted. Not because she had seen him, she always saw him, but because he realized, with a sinking feeling, that she had expected him to be here too. She had planned for this exact confrontation long before he even knew it would exist. He finally exhaled, forcing himself to ignore her. He wouldn't let her know that he cared. That would be the first battle, and he refused to lose it. Rowan? The voice was casual, almost innocent, but it carried a weight that made him freeze. He turned slowly. Ivy stood a few feet away, smiling that infuriating, knowing smile, hands stuffed into the pockets of her coat. She tilted her head slightly, as if the world were just another toy she had yet to figure out. "What do you want?" he asked, attempting neutrality but failing miserably. Ivy shrugged. "Oh, just seeing how the big bad older brother handles the same campus as me. Testing the waters." Rowan's jaw tightened. "I didn't know you were coming." "I didn't know either," she said smoothly, as if it were the truth and a joke all at once. Her grin widened. "Funny, right?" "Not really," he muttered. "Oh, come on. Lighten up." She took a step closer, ignoring the line forming behind them. "We could have fun. Or misery. Depends on how you see it." Rowan felt a flicker of panic. Fun? Misery? That was always her phrasing. Always presenting chaos as a choice, as though she were merely offering him options instead of dragging him into her schemes. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets. "I don't think this is a good idea. We should avoid each other." Ivy arched a brow. "Avoid each other?" "Oh, Rowan, come on. That would be boring. We're twins. Destiny practically demands we collide at every possible angle." Rowan groaned. "I'm not interested in destiny. Or chaos. Or whatever this is." Ivy tilted her head again, studying him like a scientist observing an unpredictable specimen. "Fine. But let me be clear, I don't plan on hiding from you. And you'd better figure out how to handle it, because I'm not going anywhere." That was the last straw. Rowan's hand clenched into a fist inside his coat pocket. He had endured her for years, from playground insults to shared classrooms where she dominated attention with her wit and audacity. And now? College, which he had pictured as a clean slate, was already tainted by her brilliance and her chaos. "Ivy," he said, his voice firmer, a rare edge of authority threading through his calm. "We act like strangers. On campus, we pretend we don't know each other. Understood?" Ivy blinked. Then laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just that melodic, infuriating laugh that had followed him for years. "Oh, Rowan, you're serious?" "Yes," he said, taking a deep breath. "I mean it. Pretend we don't know each other. No favors. No pranks. No, he paused, swallowing. No dragging me into your mess. Her grin softened, just slightly, but her eyes sparkled with challenge. Fine. Strangers. For now. But don't think that buys you immunity. Rowan exhaled, a mixture of relief and dread. He had won this small victory, but he knew the real war had just begun. Ivy had always found a way to worm herself into every situation, every space, every plan. The rules might be established now, but Ivy Calder was nothing if not relentless. As he walked away, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. She was already talking to another student, smiling, commanding attention effortlessly. Rowan's chest tightened again, not entirely from annoyance this time. Because, as much as he hated to admit it, seeing her like that, he missed her. He turned sharply, dismissing the thought. College was supposed to be freedom. Ivy was supposed to be someone else's problem. And yet, deep down, Rowan knew that pretending to be strangers would be harder than he thought. By the time he reached his dorm, Rowan's mind was spinning with strategies, contingencies, and worst-case scenarios. Avoiding Ivy on campus would be a full-time job. He would have to be clever, watchful, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to get ahead for once. Because Ivy was brilliant. Ruthless. And entirely unpredictable. And Rowan Calder, for all his patience and long-suffering endurance, had never faced a challenge quite like this. Northbridge University might have been a new beginning, but Ivy Calder ensured it would never be normal. And Rowan realized, with a sinking certainty, that the next 4 years were going to be the hardest of his life. Northbridge University's quad was a river of movement, students rushing to class, laughing in clusters, juggling backpacks and coffee cups like acrobats. Rowan sat on a bench near the library, hood pulled low, pretending to scroll through his phone. In reality, he was scanning the crowd, already on edge. It wasn't paranoia. Not entirely. It was Ivy. He knew she was here somewhere, moving through the chaos with that perfect, effortless grace, and he had a sinking feeling she'd notice him long before he spotted her. Sure enough, a laugh, slightly too loud and melodic, caught his attention. He glanced up, heart sinking. There she was, standing beside a cluster of first-year students, hair catching the sunlight, eyes glinting with amusement at something Rowan couldn't hear. She waved at someone, then pivoted her head, just slightly, and caught his eye. Rowan stiffened. She had the audacity to grin. That smile wasn't a hello. It was a challenge. He looked away. Pretend strangers. He reminded himself again. He wasn't going to engage. And yet, he felt the pull, the magnetic tug he had fought his whole life. Ivy Calder had a way of drawing people in, and Rowan knew from experience that ignoring her completely was impossible. It wasn't just Rowan who noticed. Mason Hale, Jr., campus heartthrob, and the kind of person who turned heads without trying, was walking past when he saw Rowan stiffen. Mason paused, curious. Something about the way Rowan's eyes flicked around nervously, like he was aware of someone he shouldn't be, caught his attention. Mason had seen this look before, when someone had a crush, when someone was hiding something, when someone was completely out of their depth and trying desperately to mask it. He frowned. Rowan Calder wasn't subtle. Not in the slightest. And the way his eyes darted to a girl in the distance, Mason's gaze followed. And there she was. Ivy Calder. Red hair, confident stride, the kind of girl who seemed to command a space she didn't even occupy yet. Mason's lips pressed together. He didn't like her. Not at first glance. Rowan's reaction had tipped him off, this girl had some kind of hold over him. And Mason didn't trust it. Hey, Mason said, stepping forward, sliding into the bench next to Rowan. You okay? Rowan blinked, startled. Yeah. Mason studied him, narrowing his eyes. You don't look okay. Rowan's jaw tightened. He didn't need a lecture, not from anyone. I'm fine. Mason tilted his head, suspicious. You're fine with staring at a girl like that? Rowan looked away, too quickly. Mason's frown deepened. There was something odd here. Protective, almost fierce. And yet, Mason had no reason to trust the first impression. Ivy, Rowan muttered, almost under his breath. Mason stiffened. He had heard the name before, rumors, whispers. She had a reputation for bending people to her will, charming some, intimidating others. But Rowan, who looked like he could handle himself, was acting like she had just struck a nerve. That intrigued Mason. She not your type, or is she trouble? Mason asked casually, leaning back. Rowan's eyes snapped to him, and for the first time, Mason caught a flicker of something raw in his gaze. Both, Rowan said flatly. Mason chuckled, leaning closer. I like your honesty. Rowan didn't respond. He was suddenly hyper-aware of Ivy in the distance, and of Mason sitting too close, asking too many questions. Rowan didn't want a friend. He didn't want advice. He didn't want interference. And yet, Mason wasn't leaving. As if sensing Rowan's tension, Mason tilted his head toward Ivy. She has a way of doing that, huh? Getting under your skin? Rowan bristled. You don't know anything about her. I know enough, Mason replied evenly. I know enough to see you're acting like you're going to explode, and I know enough to know she's worth it. Rowan froze. She's worth it? Mason didn't know her. He didn't get it. Rowan clenched his fists under his jacket. She's not what you think, Rowan said finally. She's complicated. Mason raised a brow. Complicated girls? That's everyone in college. Or are we talking Ivy-level complicated? Rowan's eyes narrowed. You don't even want to know. Mason smiled faintly, leaning back. Try me. Rowan exhaled sharply. He had underestimated Mason Hale. Already, he was trying to dig into Ivy's life, to figure her out, to see what Rowan wasn't telling him. Rowan didn't want a friend. But Mason was persistent. And Ivy had a way of leaving people behind in the dust, people who didn't keep up. Rowan looked back toward Ivy, who was now laughing at something no one else could hear, oblivious to the two watching her. Rowan's stomach twisted. She had always been a force of nature, but seeing her in the open, here in the heart of the campus, he realized something he hadn't before. He wasn't just protective. He was worried. And maybe, just maybe, a little afraid of losing control. Mason noticed the shift immediately. Rowan's posture, the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of panic in his gaze, it was unusual, out of character. Mason grinned. She got to you, huh? Rowan clenched his teeth. She's my sister, he admitted, almost reluctantly. Mason blinked. Sister? Yes, Rowan said quietly. Fraternal. Different last names. No one knows. And she's trouble. Mason's grin widened. Oh. That's new. That's fun. Rowan turned to him, exasperated. It's not fun. Mason laughed softly. You're going to have to get used to it. Ivy doesn't do anything halfway, does she? Rowan's lips twitched, almost a smile. No. She doesn't. And for the first time, Mason realized something. Rowan wasn't just intimidated. He was caught in a bind. Loyal to a fault. Frustrated. Tired. And yet, he couldn't walk away. I get it, Mason said quietly. You're stuck with her. And you hate it. Rowan didn't respond. He just watched Ivy move across the quad, laughing and shining, like she owned the place. Rowan had spent 12 years surviving her chaos. Now, Mason realized, he would have to survive it, and maybe even participate. Because Ivy Calder didn't leave anyone behind. And somehow, Rowan knew that would include Mason, whether he liked it or not. The cafeteria buzzed like a beehive, trays clattering, students laughing and shouting across tables. Rowan tried to navigate it like any normal student, but it was impossible when Ivy Calder was in the room. She was seated at a corner table with her usual entourage, a mix of admirers and the mildly terrified, grinning as if the entire chaos was scripted for her amusement. Rowan took a deep breath, gripping the strap of his backpack. Pretend strangers. He repeated the mantra in his head like a lifeline. He would not engage. He would not provoke. And above all, he would not, under any circumstances, show that she could still get to him after 12 years. That was the plan. Of course, Ivy had her own plan. Rowan's eyes narrowed as she suddenly looked up from her phone, scanning the room with the precision of a general on a battlefield. Their gazes met. She raised an eyebrow. The silent challenge was clear, she knew he was here, and she knew he was trying not to react. Rowan sighed. This was already going to be hell. He tried to find a spot far from her, somewhere quiet, somewhere neutral. But fate, or Ivy, had other ideas. Rowan. He froze. She wasn't calling him across the table. No, she was calling him like she was announcing his presence to the entire cafeteria. Heads turned. Trays halted mid-air. Conversations died down. Rowan felt his face heat. He looked toward the sound. Ivy had risen, hands on her hips, grin wicked. Come sit here. You look lonely. No, he muttered under his breath, tugging his head lower. But the cafeteria, as if conspiring with Ivy, made it impossible. He had to walk past her. Every step was a struggle against years of reflexive annoyance and the instinct to just shove her into the nearest tray of mashed potatoes. When he reached the table, Ivy clapped her hands once, mock cheerful. Oh. Look who decided to join the commoners. Rowan froze. You didn't what? Decide to breathe, she interrupted, leaning closer. Honestly, I was starting to think you might actually survive a meal without speaking to me. How boring would that have been? Rowan's teeth clenched. He could feel the simmering heat rise in his chest. He wanted to say something clever, something biting, but he had promised himself restraint. And yet, 12 years of accumulated frustration boiled over. You look ridiculous, Ivy said suddenly, voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Flathead King. Seriously? Is that your new thing? The cafeteria went silent. Rowan's face strained. Every pair of eyes on him. And then, something unexpected happened. Mason Hale, who had been sitting at a nearby table pretending to read, stood up abruptly, chest puffed with indignation. What did you just call him? Ivy turned, feigning innocence, eyes sparkling. Oh, this? Just a nickname. Light-hearted. A bit of fun. Mason's jaw tightened. Fun doesn't involve insulting your friend. Rowan blinked. His heart raced, not with embarrassment this time, but with a strange warmth. Mason, this infuriatingly handsome, annoying, almost human force of chaos, was standing up for him. For Rowan. Don't, Rowan said quietly but firmly, placing a hand on Mason's arm. He wasn't ready for the confrontation to escalate. It's fine. Ivy raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Fine? He's fine? Oh, Rowan, you really are easy to read. Mason's frown deepened. You don't call someone names because it's fine. Rowan shook his head. She's complicated. That's how she shows she cares. The cafeteria collectively paused. Rolling through the absurdity of Ivy's behavior, Mason's expression shifted from anger to disbelief. She insults you, and that's supposed to mean she cares? Rowan shrugged, cheeks burning. Yes. Trust me, it's her way. Ivy's grin widened. See? He gets me. Mason rubbed his temples. You brainwashed him. I have not, Rowan said automatically, almost defensively. I just understand her. The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. Students whispered, some laughed, some stared like the cafeteria had turned into a live sitcom. But Rowan barely noticed. Then, the next test came. Ivy was peeling a grape, careful to leave the skin on the table. Rowan, almost automatically, stood, bent down, and picked up the discarded skin, kneeling as if it were an act of reverence. Silence. Dead silence. Mason's jaw dropped. Ivy clapped her hands lightly. Bravo, my loyal knight, she said, voice dripping with amusement. Rowan, you always know the right thing to do. Rowan flushed a deep red, muttering under his breath. Stop calling me that. But Mason couldn't stay silent. She literally made you pick up a grape skin and you knelt? Rowan's eyes darted to Mason, almost pleading. It's instinct. Just trust me. Mason groaned, running a hand through his hair. I need a moment. Ivy laughed, leaning back in her chair, radiant with mischief. See, Mason? He's mine. You can't even get close. Rowan sighed, wishing for a moment that someone, anyone, could just step in and restore normalcy. But Ivy had made it abundantly clear, normalcy didn't exist in her orbit. The cafeteria slowly returned to its hum, but the energy had shifted. Mason stared at Rowan with a mixture of awe, disbelief, and the faintest trace of something else, something that hinted at a storm of loyalty that would soon turn into obsession. And Rowan? Rowan realized he was caught in a new kind of chaos. Not the chaos of Ivy's tricks, not the chaos of sibling rivalry, but the chaos of someone else taking notice. Someone else stepping in. Someone who could, if he allowed it, shake the delicate balance Ivy had established over him for 12 years. Ivy noticed the subtle shift too. She leaned back, watching Mason fumble for words, Rowan blush, and the cafeteria return to its mundane noise. A slow smile spread across her face. This was just the beginning. Because Ivy Calder didn't just play games, she orchestrated symphonies. And now, she had two instruments in her hands, Rowan Calder, who had always been hers, and Mason Hale, who didn't yet know how deeply he was about to fall under her influence. And somewhere deep down, Rowan knew one undeniable truth: pretending to be strangers wasn't going to work for long. Not with her. Not with Mason. And certainly, not with himself. The campus quad was quieter in the late afternoon. Students scurried to early classes, and the wind carried a crisp bite that made jackets hug bodies a little tighter. Ivy sat cross-legged on a bench, a notebook balanced on her lap, pencil tapping idly. She watched Mason from across the path, her sharp green eyes gleaming like a cat watching a mouse, except this mouse was wide-eyed, anxious, and utterly enthralled. Mason had been following her for days, she noted with satisfaction. Not stalking, per se. He had the decency to pretend it wasn't happening, but the signs were obvious. A hesitant wave here, a notebook dropped there, a sudden appearance wherever she happened to be. Mason Hale, the confident, charming, slightly cocky senior, had become utterly enmeshed in Ivy's orbit. And it was delicious. She smiled to herself. But Ivy was bored. Mason's loyalty was impressive, yes, but predictable. He followed instructions, panicked when he made mistakes, and seemed to have a default setting of do anything for Ivy. That wasn't fun anymore. That wasn't Ivy Calder level chaos. No. She needed a real challenge. Rowan appeared then, backpack slung lazily over one shoulder, hands stuffed in pockets. He paused beside her bench, eyes darting to Mason across the path. Rowan didn't say hello. He didn't sit. He just looked, wary and slightly incredulous. Ivy raised an eyebrow. Well, if it isn't my personal shadow. Rowan's lips twitched. I'm not your shadow. She said, tapping her pencil against the notebook. Keep telling yourself that, old man. Rowan frowned, trying not to think about how weird it was that she was calling him old man when she'd barely started counting her own years. His focus returned to Mason, who now awkwardly shifted from foot to foot, as though he had been caught sneaking. Why is he here? Rowan muttered. Ivy hummed. Interesting question. You tell me. Why is your new friend observing so carefully? Rowan hesitated. He wanted to protect Mason, wanted to warn him. But Ivy's grin told him that any interference would only play into her hands. Mason, meanwhile, finally found his voice. I'm just interested. Ivy tilted her head, voice lilting with amusement. Interested in what, exactly? Mason cleared his throat. In proving you're not as terrifying as everyone says. Rowan snorted under his breath. You're in way over your head. Ivy's eyes narrowed, sparking with challenge. Oh, you think so? She asked Mason. Interesting. Tell me, Mason Hale, how committed are you to this little experiment? Mason blinked. He thought he knew commitment. He thought he could handle Ivy Calder. But there was something in her tone that made him pause. She wasn't just teasing. She was testing. Measuring. Waiting for him to make a mistake. I'll do my best, he said cautiously. Ivy leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. Your best, she echoed, voice softening in a way that made it seem almost intimate. That won't be enough. Mason swallowed, feeling the familiar stirrings of panic and intrigue. He had been warned that Ivy was dangerous, unpredictable, clever, but he had not anticipated this level of precision. Not this quiet intensity. And, Ivy continued, eyes flicking toward Rowan with a teasing smirk, if your best isn't good enough, she trailed off, letting the sentence hang like a blade. Rowan shifted uncomfortably. Ivy, no, she interrupted. This is fun. I like Mason Hale. He's promising. She tapped her pencil against the notebook again, thinking. But he needs structure. Incentives. Guidance. A challenge. Don't you agree? Rowan groaned. You don't need to involve him in silence, Ivy said sharply, and Rowan froze. Or I'll give you an example of what happens when my instructions aren't followed. You've seen it before, remember? Mason's chest tightened. Instructions. Mistakes. Punishment. The memory of the cafeteria incident, the grape skin, the embarrassing submission, flashed through his mind. Ivy grinned wider. So, here's the proposal. Mason Hale, I will give you a month. 30 days. You will attempt to unravel me. Understand me. Keep up with me. Anticipate my whims. And Rowan, her green eyes flicked to him, you will watch and learn. Rowan's jaw dropped. Watch and learn. That's insane. Ivy tilted her head. Not insane. A game. A bet. A challenge. Whoever succeeds will, well, let's not decide the reward yet. Part of the fun is seeing how far you'll go. Mason's mind raced. She wasn't just testing him. She was challenging him to become something. Someone who could handle her, predict her, survive her. That was a terrifying thought, and a compelling one. I accept, he said, surprising even himself. His voice was firm now, steady. I'll do it. Ivy's smile curved into something almost feral. Excellent. She leaned back, satisfied. Oh, and one more thing. Rowan groaned. Of course. You, she said, pointing at Rowan, are officially my second target. Rowan blinked. What? You, Ivy said again, mock serious, will continue being the example of sibling loyalty, but now also act as Mason's guide. Let's see if he can follow your example without whining too much. Rowan's expression froze. Mason's jaw tensed. Ivy's eyes twinkled with mischief and cruelty. This is, Rowan began, then stopped. There were no words. This was Ivy Calder. Chaos wrapped in a beautiful smile, and somehow, they were all caught in it. Mason swallowed again. He didn't know what he'd gotten himself into, but he could feel a strange sense of purpose rising in him. This wasn't just about Ivy anymore. It was about proving something to himself, and surviving whatever she decided to throw at him. Ivy leaned back, satisfied. Good. The game begins tomorrow. Prepare yourselves. Rowan sighed, slumping onto the bench beside her. I can't believe I agreed to sit here. You didn't, Ivy said, smirking. I did. And that's the difference. Mason, standing stiffly nearby, realized something profound. Ivy Calder didn't just lead the game. She defined it. And if he was going to survive this, he would have to play by her rules, or be destroyed by them. Rowan's eyes flicked to Mason. You have no idea what you've signed up for. Mason grinned faintly. I think I'm starting to. Ivy, watching them both, allowed herself a small, satisfied laugh. The symphony of chaos had begun. And it was going to be glorious. Mason Hale had never been tested like this before. Sure, he'd faced competitive academics, campus politics, even the occasional prank war, but Ivy Calder was a whole different league. Every instinct he had, patience, strategy, confidence, was being stretched, prodded, and toyed with. And worse, he was enjoying it. It started with a simple message. I need a breakfast. Complicated. You'll know if you fail. Mason stared at the text on his phone, exhaling slowly. He had no context. No hints. No margin for error. But he was already invested. Already alert. Already trying to anticipate Ivy's next move. Rowan, he muttered, leaning against the doorframe of the dorm room he now shared with Rowan, I think I'm in trouble. Rowan, sprawled on the bed with his laptop, didn't look up. Understatement of the year. You're not in trouble. You're signing up for chaos. I know, Mason said, exhaling sharply. But I don't even know what she wants for breakfast. Rowan finally glanced up, green eyes glittering with amusement. Of course you don't. That's the point. You're supposed to learn. She's unpredictable. I can handle unpredictable, Mason said, more confidently than he felt. Rowan raised a brow. We'll see. The first task was deceptively simple: deliver a breakfast to Ivy's favorite study spot across campus. Mason spent hours preparing, checking every detail, triple-checking the exact amount of sugar in her coffee, the type of bread for her toast, and even the order of condiments. He rehearsed the route in his head, memorized the cafeteria layout, and tried to predict Ivy's schedule to the minute. When he finally arrived, backpack balanced carefully and tray in hand, Ivy was already there, feet propped on the bench, reading a textbook upside down. She glanced up, smirked, and tilted her head. "You're late," she said, as if it were the gravest offense. Mason's chest tightened. "I got caught in the crowd." "Excuses," Ivy said lightly, plucking the coffee from the tray. She sipped it delicately, then arched an eyebrow. "Wrong sugar." Mason's heart sank. "Wrong sugar?" Ivy leaned back, folding her arms, a predator observing its prey. "2 packets. Not 1. And you stirred clockwise, not counterclockwise." Tiny detail, but significant. Mason groaned. "How do you notice everything?" Ivy shrugged, eyes twinkling. "Because I notice everything. And now you know my expectations." Rowan, who had followed discreetly to supervise, muttered under his breath. "You're insane." "You're learning," Ivy said, grinning at Mason. "Now, take note, paying attention is the first step to surviving me." And so began the training. It wasn't all breakfasts and obsessive note-taking. Ivy started sending Mason challenges, trivial things that quickly became absurd. Retrieve a specific pencil from the library shelf without alerting a student. Memorize her lecture schedule and predict her snack breaks. Choose the exact music she wanted during study sessions. Each task seemed small, but the pressure and unpredictability wore him down and built him up at the same time. Rowan observed it all like a reluctant referee. He would occasionally offer advice, mostly sarcastic. "She's going to change the rules on you. That's how she works. Don't get too comfortable." Mason nodded, silently grateful for Rowan's insight. He had never met anyone like Ivy. She didn't just command attention, she demanded understanding. And for someone used to being admired and respected effortlessly, this was humbling. The turning point came one evening when Mason miscalculated. He had arrived with her favorite study snack, perfectly packaged, precisely timed, but Ivy was not amused. "You forgot the extra napkin," she said softly, almost mockingly. "And did you leave it folded correctly?" "No. It's unacceptable." Mason felt panic rising, like an unexpected storm in his chest. He had studied every nuance, anticipated every preference, but he had failed. "Rowan," Mason muttered, voice tight, "she's impossible." Rowan shook his head, trying not to smile. "Impossible? You're just starting. Wait until she adds a variable. You'll lose your mind and still love it." Ivy, noticing Mason's dismay, laughed. Not cruelly, playfully. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "Mason, you're learning. And learning requires mistakes. Watch, listen, absorb. You'll get there." Her words were light, but the undercurrent of authority and expectation pressed against him. Mason realized something essential: he wasn't just doing these tasks to please her. He was choosing to do them, because he wanted to rise to her level, to meet the chaos head-on, and, most dangerously, because he liked being in her orbit. Rowan watched silently, noting the shift. Mason's determination was growing, tempered by Ivy's unpredictability. The boy who had mocked simp culture was becoming invested in something far more complicated, earning Ivy's approval, understanding her patterns, and keeping pace with her intelligence. And Rowan? Rowan couldn't help but feel a twinge of admiration. Mason wasn't just surviving Ivy's chaos, he was learning, growing, and adapting in ways Rowan hadn't expected. But Ivy, of course, wasn't finished. She had one more twist in store. "Tomorrow," she said, voice soft but dangerous, "you'll handle a social challenge. Mason, you will interact with a group of students, predict their responses, and anticipate mine." She let the words linger. "Rowan, you'll observe. Take notes. This is next level." Rowan groaned. "Why am I always the observer?" Ivy smirked. "Because someone has to make sure he doesn't completely implode. And someone has to make sure you don't intervene too much." Mason, chest tight with anticipation, nodded. Understood. Ivy's smile widened. Good. Remember, boys, this is just the beginning. Only the clever survive me. Only the attentive thrive. And those who falter, she tilted her head, voice dropping to a playful whisper. Learn in unforgettable ways. Rowan shook his head again, smiling despite himself. Mason sighed, his heart racing, and Ivy leaned back, victorious. The training had begun. And in the quiet aftermath, Rowan realized something. Ivy Calder had created not just chaos, but growth. She had forced Mason, and, by extension, him, to confront limits, expectations, and desires they hadn't even admitted to themselves. And Mason? Mason was rising to the challenge. Rowan wasn't sure if that was good news, or terrifying. The campus was unusually quiet for a Thursday afternoon, the calm deceptive under the pink and red banners fluttering from every lamppost. Valentine's Day at Northbridge University was never subtle. Heart-shaped balloons, chocolate stands, and cheesy posters adorned every corner. Rowan walked across the quad, hands stuffed into his pockets, eyes darting to every couple holding hands, every note passed discreetly between students. He shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be thinking about Ivy, shouldn't be letting Mason's newfound intensity gnaw at him, and certainly shouldn't be letting the butterfly in his stomach, the one he didn't want, stir as he imagined what Ivy might be doing right now. But he was here. And he wasn't alone. Ivy, of course, had planned for chaos. Mason appeared on the opposite side of the quad, hoodie drawn tight against the chill, clutching a small bouquet of flowers that looked absurdly tiny in his large hands. His brow was furrowed, the tension in his shoulders betraying nerves that even Rowan could see from this distance. Mason was here for Ivy, predictable, but committed. Rowan's stomach twisted. He had expected this, but the reality was sharper than anticipation. Ivy had orchestrated a scenario where both he and Mason would be involved, though he had no clue how she had managed it. She was already several steps ahead, as always. He saw her first when she appeared at the edge of the small outdoor theater, a pastel scarf fluttering around her neck, a mischievous glint in her eyes. She was radiant, effortlessly commanding attention even without trying. She waved, deliberately catching both Mason and Rowan's attention, then turned and slipped inside the theater, as though daring them to follow. Rowan froze. He wasn't supposed to follow, but instinct overrode reason. He walked toward the entrance, chest tight, mind racing. Mason, ever alert, followed immediately. The three of them converged in the dimly lit theater, Ivy already halfway to the front row. Rowan's heart pounded in his chest. He should have been angry. He should have demanded answers. Instead, he felt dread. Ivy noticed Rowan first, of course. She didn't smile this time, her expression was controlled, teasing, but with a touch of triumph. Mason's eyes met hers, and she held his gaze just long enough to make his heart stutter. Rowan's gaze flicked between them. He hadn't anticipated this, seeing Mason and Ivy interact this closely, seeing the tension in Mason's stance, the slight flush on his cheeks. He felt an unfamiliar sharp sting in his chest. Jealousy? Betrayal? He wasn't sure, but it was potent enough to make his stomach twist. The lights dimmed. Ivy had chosen seats at the very front, whispering for Mason to sit beside her. Mason hesitated, then obeyed. Rowan, hesitating in the aisle, realized she had intentionally left him on the side, forcing him to watch, to feel, to endure. And endure he did. The movie started, the screen flickering, but the tension in the theater far outweighed the images. Ivy leaned subtly toward Mason during quiet moments, laughing softly at lines he didn't even remember. Rowan's fists clenched, mind spinning. He had underestimated how much seeing them together, how intimate, how connected they could seem, would affect him. It wasn't just jealousy. It was betrayal. Ivy was his sister. His twin. And yet, watching her flirt with Mason, his best friend and roommate in training, felt like a dagger twisting slowly in his chest. He tried to rationalize it. She's testing him. She's doing what she always does. It's not real. But the sight of Mason leaning closer, whispering something that made Ivy laugh softly, sent a shock of heat through Rowan's chest. He realized, painfully, that Ivy didn't need to be cruel to hurt him, her mere presence, her choices, were enough. Rowan had never felt powerless around Ivy. He had been her foil, her challenger, her equal in mischief. And yet here, he was sidelined, forced to watch someone else navigate the chaos he had lived with his entire life. He wasn't alone in noticing Mason's awkward attempts to maintain composure, his hand slightly shaking as he held the tiny bouquet, told Rowan that Ivy's influence extended beyond him. She had Mason under her spell too, and Rowan didn't know whether to feel pride or panic. The tension escalated during a particularly quiet moment in the movie. Ivy leaned close, her lips near Mason's ear, whispering something inaudible. Mason's eyes widened slightly, breath catching. Rowan's stomach dropped. The almost kiss, the one that hadn't happened yet but hovered between them like a live wire, made every nerve in Rowan's body tense. And then it happened. Rowan, forgetting all sense of discretion, forgetting rules of the game he had sworn to follow, stepped forward. "Ivy," he whispered sharply, voice low but urgent. Ivy turned, eyes sparkling with amusement. Mason froze, caught between compliance and confusion. "What?" Ivy asked, perfectly calm. Rowan's jaw tightened. "You can't, she's my sister." Mason's eyes went wide, confusion flooding his features. Ivy laughed softly, almost delighted. "Oh, Rowan, always dramatic. You really should learn to relax. Or perhaps I'm teaching him something you couldn't." Rowan's mind raced. Betrayal. Confusion. Anger. And somewhere underneath, a flicker of fear of losing control, fear of realizing that Ivy's power wasn't something he could simply defy. Mason, realizing the tension, shifted uncomfortably. "Wait, she's your sister?" Rowan nodded, voice tight. "Yes. My twin. Fraternal. No one knows. And yes, this is messed up." Ivy leaned back, grinning. "Messed up? Maybe. Entertaining? Definitely." Rowan's heart pounded. He felt a storm rising, one he couldn't control. He had underestimated Ivy's ability to manipulate not just Mason, but him as well. Watching them together, Mason's awe, Ivy's playful dominance, it was more than jealousy. It was a confrontation with his own helplessness, a reminder that Ivy had always been 3 steps ahead. By the time the movie ended, Rowan's chest was tight with frustration, Mason's mind reeling from the revelation, and Ivy was perfectly satisfied. The chaos she had orchestrated had reached its apex, both men caught in her orbit, both reacting in ways she could manipulate, both completely entangled in the web she had spun. Rowan walked out of the theater, silent, thoughts racing. He couldn't believe how deeply this affected him, Mason, Ivy, the proximity, the tension, the almost kiss. It was supposed to be Ivy's chaos, her game. And yet, Rowan felt like he had lost. Mason followed hesitantly, unsure how to process the twin revelation. Ivy walked between them, humming softly, oblivious, or perhaps intentionally aware, of the emotional fallout she had caused. Rowan finally broke the silence as they stepped into the fading daylight. You can't just do that. Not with him. Not in front of me. Not like that." Ivy tilted her head, eyes twinkling. "Or maybe I can. Or maybe I need to." Mason glanced between them, still processing. "Wait, so you're twins?" "Yes," Rowan muttered, shoulders tense. "And yes, it's complicated." Ivy smirked, clearly delighted with the chaos she had created. Rowan's heart sank. Mason's attention was divided now, loyalty tested, emotions raw. Ivy's victory was complete, but Rowan knew, this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of a storm that would challenge all of them in ways they hadn't imagined. Rowan walked across campus like a storm cloud, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets. The crisp air did little to calm the swirl of anger, confusion, and betrayal roiling in his chest. He had known Ivy Calder was chaotic, brilliant, and unpredictable, but seeing her with Mason, even if it had been an almost kiss, felt like a line had been crossed. He had underestimated the emotional weight of watching someone else navigate Ivy's orbit. He had been a bystander to Mason's awkward attempts at impressing her, the small gestures he had no idea how to execute correctly. And now, Ivy had both of them exactly where she wanted. Mason, for his part, was in full panic mode. He had tried to rationalize the theater incident, telling himself it was just Ivy's chaos, just part of the game, but the truth hit harder than he expected. Rowan, who had always been Ivy's foil, her sibling and long-suffering equal in wit and chaos, had suddenly become a barrier in Mason's mind. And the revelation that Ivy and Rowan were twins only intensified his confusion. Mason's hands shook as he typed a message to Ivy, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I don't know what to do. I need to know. He stared at the screen, thinking back to every smile, every laugh, every subtle challenge she had thrown at him over the past month. He realized, in a rush of both awe and panic, that he was now completely caught in her web. Rowan, meanwhile, had blocked Ivy's number. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. If he couldn't stop watching Ivy manipulate Mason, at least he could remove himself from the immediate temptation. The irony, of course, wasn't lost on him. He had spent 12 years surviving Ivy's chaos, and now he was voluntarily cutting himself off. Unsurprisingly, Ivy noticed. By the next morning, Mason and Rowan were both drowning in messages from her, cryptic, teasing, impossibly precise. You blocked me? How dramatic. I was hoping to see how both of you scramble. Mason groaned, feeling simultaneously terrified and thrilled. Ivy had turned their worlds into an intricate game of chess, with moves and countermoves that he couldn't fully predict. He wanted to respond, to justify, to plead, but every instinct told him that Ivy thrived on patience, observation, and subtle chaos. Rowan, sitting in the quiet corner of the library, read her messages with clenched teeth. He didn't reply. He couldn't. Every word felt like a challenge, every sentence a test of willpower. And Rowan Calder didn't lose control easily, but this was Ivy Calder. The situation escalated as the day wore on. Mason, unable to resist, began responding in small, careful increments, trying to anticipate her whims and decipher her cryptic instructions. Rowan, furious and conflicted, watched from the sidelines, feeling powerless to intervene. I can't believe I'm doing this, Mason muttered, slumping into his chair. You're doing what she wants, Rowan replied flatly, voice tight with irritation. That's the problem. Mason glanced at him, uncertainty in his eyes. Isn't that kind of the point? Rowan's hands clenched. No. The point is, she's manipulating both of us, and you're falling for it. Mason's jaw tightened. I'm learning. I'm adapting. It's not. I'm not, Rowan cut him off with a sharp glance. It's exactly that. You are falling for it. And you don't even realize it yet. Ivy's next move was subtle but devastating. She orchestrated a small campus event, a scavenger hunt across the quad, involving cryptic notes, small tasks, and time challenges. Both Rowan and Mason received instructions, their paths designed to intersect without direct confrontation. Ivy watched from the sidelines, a serene smile on her face as the chaos unfolded exactly as she intended. Mason rushed through the tasks, trying desperately to anticipate Ivy's expectations, while Rowan moved with precision, calculating, observing, and silently judging Mason's attempts. Every time Mason faltered, Ivy's soft laughter drifted through the air, barely audible but cutting. By the time they reached the final location, a quiet courtyard behind the library, Ivy was waiting, arms crossed, radiating calm authority. Mason arrived first, breathless, heart racing. Rowan followed seconds later, chest tight with frustration. Ivy's eyes flicked between them, sharp and assessing. Well, she said finally, voice lilting, that was entertaining. But tell me, boys, who learned the most today? Mason opened his mouth to answer, then paused, unsure. Rowan's jaw tightened, hands balled into fists. Ivy's gaze lingered on him, amused and triumphant. You know what, she said, smiling faintly, I don't care about your answers. I just want to see how far you'll go for me. Rowan felt a flush of anger and helplessness. Mason, meanwhile, swallowed hard, realizing she was testing them in ways that went beyond obedience. Ivy wanted psychological stakes, emotional investment, strategic thinking. And both of them were already hooked. The tension between the three reached a peak when Mason, frustrated and desperate, asked, Why are you doing this to us? Ivy tilted her head, voice soft and playful. Because I can. Because I enjoy it. Because watching you scramble, adapt, and, yes, falter, tells me more about you than any words ever could. Rowan felt his teeth grit. You're impossible. And you, Ivy said, eyes flicking to Mason, are just beginning to understand that. By the end of the day, both boys were emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, and completely captivated by Ivy's intricate games. Rowan left the campus with a storm of conflicting emotions: frustration, jealousy, awe, and the faintest sense of admiration for Mason's perseverance. Mason, meanwhile, walked with renewed determination, resolved to continue the training, the challenge, the game Ivy had set in motion. Ivy, of course, watched them both retreat, satisfied. The chaos was far from over. She had planted seeds of obsession, rivalry, and admiration. The fallout of Valentine's Day had only strengthened her influence over both of them. And Rowan, for the first time in his life, realized something terrifying: Ivy Calder had not just won the day, she had won the battle for their attention, their focus, and, perhaps, their hearts. The first time Ivy mentioned her parents would be visiting, Rowan groaned so loudly it echoed down the dorm hallway. He had survived 12 years of Ivy's chaos without parental interference. 12 years. And now, just as Mason had begun navigating Ivy's world, her family was entering it, like an unstoppable hurricane. Mason, for his part, tried to appear calm. But the truth was written across his face, panic simmering just below the surface. He had never met anyone like Ivy's parents, and the thought of trying to impress them while simultaneously keeping up with Ivy's complex instructions felt like preparing for a duel in a minefield. Rowan, meanwhile, had already decided that the only reasonable course of action was to mentally prepare for disaster. The moment Ivy's parents arrived, disaster unfolded. Her father, a tall man with a stern but warm expression, stepped into the apartment first. Ivy's mother followed, exuding a quiet authority and an air of patience that masked the chaos they were about to witness. Rowan, seeing them for the first time in years, felt a pang of nostalgia, and a sudden wave of panic. He bolted. Not physically, but emotionally, rushing toward Ivy's father. "Dad," he cried, voice cracking, face red with a mix of embarrassment and desperation. "You have to understand. It's not what it looks like, she's my sister." Her father froze mid-step, bewildered. Mason, who had been observing from a respectful distance, blinked in shock. Rowan's dramatic reaction was confusing enough, but Mason's mind immediately took it a step further. "Wait," Mason muttered under his breath. He's doing this to impress her parents?" Rowan turned, horrified. "What? No. Absolutely not." Mason frowned, eyes narrowing. "But he called her dad. Isn't that a gesture?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "He doesn't, he's not, ugh. I can't deal with you right now." Ivy, of course, found the entire exchange utterly hilarious. She leaned back on the couch, sipping her coffee with the calm of someone watching a live comedy show, letting the chaos unfold exactly as she intended. Mason, ever the competitor, wasn't going to be outdone. "If he's going to impress her family, then you're not," Rowan interrupted, throwing up his hands. "Stop. You don't even know what's happening." Mason's competitive instincts ignored the warning. He marched forward, chest puffed, and called Ivy's father Dad in the most confident tone he could muster. Rowan groaned so loudly it drew the attention of Ivy's mother, who raised a brow. "And you are?" she asked. "Mason Hale," he said, extending a hand. "I admire your daughter. Deeply. And I wanted to meet the family properly." Rowan's head dropped into his hands. Ivy's mother glanced at Ivy, who shrugged with a perfectly innocent expression. "Interesting choice of words," she said dryly. The rest of the visit unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of disaster. Mason and Rowan both vied for attention, inadvertently tripping over each other as they tried to display loyalty, respect, and charm simultaneously. Ivy's parents exchanged glances, silently questioning which of the two young men was actually in love with whom. Rowan tried to salvage some dignity, explaining every misunderstanding in detail, but every clarification only created more confusion. Mason, stubborn and competitive, refused to yield ground. By the time lunch was served, the apartment resembled a battlefield of misplaced intentions and emotional overreach. And Ivy? She remained blissfully entertained, observing every interaction, every awkward gesture, every tense pause, and recording it all mentally for future amusement. The chaos reached its peak when Ivy's father, exasperated but amused, asked Rowan why Mason was so eager to impress him. Rowan, mortified, muttered, "I don't know. He's competitive." Mason, misinterpreting the explanation, leaned forward, beaming. "Exactly. I'm here to show respect. And love." Rowan groaned so loudly it almost knocked over a vase. Ivy's mother covered her mouth to hide laughter. Ivy herself clapped softly, whispering, "Bravo. Couldn't have scripted it better myself." By the end of the visit, both Rowan and Mason were emotionally drained, coated in embarrassment, and fully aware that Ivy had orchestrated every second for maximum chaos. Rowan had finally accepted one uncomfortable truth: Ivy's influence extended beyond the normal bounds of sibling rivalry. Mason's devotion, though admirable, made him another instrument in her symphony of manipulation. And Ivy, smiling quietly to herself, knew exactly how much control she wielded. Two young men, completely enmeshed in her world, dancing to her tune, unaware that every move they made was both expected and utterly irresistible to her. Rowan, walking Mason to the door afterward, muttered, "I can't believe you. You think impressing her parents matters?" Mason shrugged, a faint smile on his lips despite exhaustion. "I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it's part of surviving her." Rowan shook his head. "Surviving her? Mason, you're already halfway addicted." Mason glanced back toward the apartment, where Ivy had waved lazily from the window. "Maybe, that's the point." Rowan groaned. Ivy Calder had won again, and he still didn't know if he was furious, impressed, or terrified. Probably all three. The holiday air was crisp and fragrant with pine, carrying the faint promise of snow. Ivy Calder's house looked festive, wreaths on the door, lights twinkling in the windows. Mason had followed her here despite the chaos of campus life, his chest tight with anxiety and anticipation. He had assumed he understood Ivy by now, her games, her mischief, her subtle manipulations. But nothing had prepared him for the reality of her home, warm, inviting, and entirely in her control. He hesitated on the doorstep, hand raised to knock, only to have the door swing open and Rowan appear. Pajamas, messy hair, a fresh red mark on his cheek from some sibling scuffle, eyes wide with surprise and confusion. "Mason?" Rowan said, voice tense. "What are you doing here?" I came to see Ivy," Mason stammered, hands tightening around his coat. "I wanted." Rowan's expression shifted, suspicion flaring. "You came here for Ivy?" "Yes," Mason said, blunt now, desperation creeping into his tone. "Why does it matter?" Rowan's stomach sank. "Because, she's my sister." Mason froze. The words landed like a hammer. "Your sister?" "Yes." Rowan's voice cracked slightly with frustration. "I've tried to keep it secret, but, damn it. I didn't think you'd actually follow her home." Mason blinked, mind reeling. Ivy's manipulations, the Valentine's Day tension, all of the subtle games, it suddenly made sense. Rowan wasn't just another friend, another obstacle, he was Ivy's twin, her long-suffering sibling, and the key to understanding everything she did. Before Mason could respond, Rowan, overwhelmed with emotion, stepped forward. Wait, you don't even know how many times I've, ugh." And then Mason, panicked, misread the flailing motion as aggression. Without thinking, his fist shot forward, connecting squarely with Rowan's chest. Rowan stumbled back, eyes wide with shock and indignation. "What?" Rowan yelled, clutching himself, voice rising. I thought you were attacking her." Mason exclaimed, horror washing over him. His mind raced, he had misinterpreted every signal, every flinch, every subtle gesture. And now, he had just punched Ivy's brother. The door swung open behind them, and Ivy appeared, hands on her hips, eyes wide with incredulity. "What did you just, oh my God?" Rowan spun toward her, half in pain, half in frustration. "I'm your brother, Ivy. Your twin." He just, Ivy's mouth dropped open. Then she laughed. A sharp, incredulous laugh that made Mason's chest tighten further. You what?" she said, voice trembling with amusement. "You punched him?" Rowan groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Yes. Because he didn't know." Mason's face turned crimson. "I didn't know. I thought, he is my brother." Ivy shouted, crossing her arms. "Do you understand now? Do you get it? He's been subjected to me for 12 years, Mason. 12. And now you," she shook her head, laughing despite herself. "You made it worse." Rowan, still rubbing his chest, muttered, "You could have told me sooner." Ivy waved a hand dismissively, smirking. "And spoil the dramatic reveal?" Mason, meet your ultimate challenge, understanding me and surviving my family. Mason blinked, taking a shaky step back. So, everything, the Valentine's Day thing, the theater, the training, all of it, yes, Ivy said, grinning, pointing to Rowan. All of it. My twin. My chaos. And now you get the full picture. Rowan groaned, sliding down against the wall. I can't believe this. 12 years of being bossed around, and now you're dating. Mason, trying to make sense of the situation, looked at Ivy. Wait, so you didn't choose him over me? Ivy rolled her eyes. Mason, calm down. You two are entangled in ways I find highly entertaining. That's all. Rowan's head fell into his hands. Mason, still red-faced, muttered, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Ivy cut him off with a sharp laugh. Oh, Mason. You have no idea what's coming next. But congratulations, both of you, the truth is finally out. For a long moment, the three of them stood in tense silence. Then Rowan shook his head, voice weary but laced with humor. Ivy, you really are impossible. I know, she said lightly, smirking. And don't you forget it. Mason exhaled, shoulders slumping. I think I understand now. But wow. Rowan glared at him. Try not to punch me again, got it? Mason gave a sheepish nod, still processing. Got it. I swear. No more punching. Ivy watched the exchange, satisfied. The truth had finally come out, chaos had reached its peak, and yet, somehow, the three of them had survived. For now. Rowan muttered under his breath, I can't believe this is my life. Ivy winked. Oh, you'll get used to it. Eventually. And with that, the storm of misunderstandings, punches, and dramatic reveals settled into a tense calm, until Ivy, of course, decided the chaos was far from over. Winter had settled over Northbridge University in a quiet hush, the kind that made snow-covered rooftops gleam and streets crunch underfoot. Ivy Calder walked across campus with Mason Hale at her side, her scarf trailing behind her like a banner announcing victory. For once, Rowan Calder, her twin, long-suffering foil, and unofficial chaos enforcer, was trailing behind, arms crossed, muttering complaints under his breath that no one else could hear. It had taken weeks to untangle the mess of Valentine's Day, parental misunderstandings, and Ivy's endless manipulations. Mason had survived Ivy's training, Rowan had survived Ivy's scheming, and Ivy had thrived exactly as expected. Now, the trio's dynamic had shifted. Ivy and Mason were officially a pair, though Mason's devotion had matured from panic-driven attempts at perfection to genuine care and understanding. Rowan, on the other hand, had been relegated to his rightful role, the permanent, exasperated third wheel. You know, Rowan muttered, shoving his hands into his coat pockets, I really don't see why I'm still involved in this. I've done my time. I survived 12 years. Mason survived, what, a month? Ivy laughed softly. Oh, Rowan. You think this is about surviving me? Mason glanced at her, curiosity etched on his face. It's not? Ivy tilted her head, eyes twinkling. It's about thriving in my chaos. You both have your places now. Mason, you're my partner in disaster. Rowan, you're the eternal observer, advisor, and occasional annoyance. Rowan groaned. Occasional? That's generous. Mason chuckled nervously. I guess I can handle that. You'd better, Ivy said, smiling. Because someone has to make sure you don't slip up again. The three of them walked past the library, past couples holding hands, past students staring at Ivy with awe and confusion. They had become somewhat of a legend on campus, not just for Ivy's antics, but for the strange trio she had created. Then Ivy paused, a sly grin spreading across her face. Oh, by the way, Rowan raised an eyebrow. No surprises today. I can't handle it. Ivy ignored him. We're going to see someone very special. Mason frowned. Who? Ivy's grin widened as she led them down a narrow street to a small clinic. The sign read Northbridge Medical Center. Rowan immediately recognized the place, the doctor who had delivered them. Wait, Rowan said, eyes narrowing. You want to see the doctor? Ivy nodded. Curious about something. A little twist in our story. Inside, they were greeted by the doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes and a knowing smile. "Ah," he said, looking at the trio. "The infamous Calder twins and Mason. I've heard about all of you." Rowan shifted uneasily. Doctor, we were just," the doctor chuckled softly. "No need for explanations. But there's something you should know. Something that will change your perspective a bit." Ivy leaned forward, intrigued. "Oh?" The doctor smiled. "Rowan, you were actually born first." Rowan froze, jaw-dropping. "What?" Ivy blinked, then laughed, a sound full of disbelief and triumph. "Wait, so, all those years I've been calling myself the older sister, you were actually first?" Rowan rubbed his eyes. I can't believe this. 12 years. 12 years of her torment, and I'm actually older." Mason's eyebrows shot up. "So, all the favoritism, the chaos, it wasn't even legitimate?" Ivy threw her head back, laughing uncontrollably. Oh my god. This changes everything. And yet, not really." The doctor smiled warmly. "Sometimes birth order is just a number. You've created a new dynamic all your own. And it seems you've all adapted, quite creatively, I might add." Rowan shook his head, half amused, half exasperated. I don't know whether to be angry, impressed, or completely defeated." Ivy winked at Mason. "Well, Mason, I guess this means your position as devoted partner is fully legitimate now." Mason gulped, heart racing, but a small smile tugged at his lips. I'm fine with that. Fully, permanently devoted. I don't mind." Rowan groaned dramatically. "Of course you don't mind. You always do exactly what she wants." Ivy laughed, throwing an arm around Mason. "Oh, Rowan. That's the point. And now you're free, from servitude, from being the target. But you'll always be my twin. The eternal chaos co-pilot." Rowan sighed, half defeated, half amused. "Great. Permanent third wheel. Legend of campus chaos. Fantastic." Ivy tugged him into a playful headlock. "Don't look so glum. You've earned your freedom. Just, don't get too comfortable." Mason smiled, looking at Ivy and Rowan. For once, the chaos felt warm, familiar, and strangely perfect. He had survived Ivy's training, navigated her games, and come out not just alive but genuinely part of her world. Rowan, despite himself, laughed softly. "I guess I can live with this. At least I'm not being bossed around anymore." Ivy grinned, triumphant. "See? Chaos with me isn't punishment. It's life." The three of them walked out into the snowy evening, Ivy and Mason side by side, Rowan trailing behind, muttering complaints but secretly content. The campus legend of the Calder Chaos Trio had solidified, now with a twist that no one, not even Ivy, could have fully predicted. The older sibling had finally been revealed, but the hierarchy remained unchanged. Ivy's laughter rang through the quiet streets, Mason grinning nervously, and Rowan, the eternal third wheel, shaking his head but smiling anyway. And so, the new order was established. Ivy Calder reigned supreme. Mason Hale had willingly and permanently claimed his place as devoted partner. Rowan Calder, now fully aware of his birthright and freedom from servitude, accepted the role of mischievous observer, chaos co-pilot, and permanent thorn in Mason's side. The snow fell gently around them, quiet and serene, but anyone who knew them understood, the chaos would never end. And they wouldn't want it any other way.